Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and we're joined tonight by our core away team of professionals. We have Barbara J. Kailberg, the Empress of the Inks. We have Rob Davis, the Paragon of Pencils, the Superior Skeptic, Aaron Humphreys, who made it just in the nick of time, and one of the Wizards of Wordplay, Rory Boyle, is with us tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about giant monster mayhem, all those lovable giants that some of us grew up watching at the Creature Feature, everything from King Kong, Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, Monster Zero, Mighty Joe Young, all the way down to the comic book stuff like Fin Fang Foom, which is always a crazy name, but it sticks in your head. But there's also the kaiju that are very popular now, especially with Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim 2, which I didn't see. You guys will have to update me on whether that was good or not. But so, without further ado, we're going to start with tales of working on a giant monster comic book from Barb, who actually got to work on Godzilla for Dark Horse. So tell us about that, Barb. When and how did that happen? What era are we talking about? And what was the story, if you remember? And the creative team. I'd like to hear all that.
Oh my God. It was back in the 90s, and the creative team escapes me right now, which is horrible.
Okay.
I realize that. But it was eventually collected into a graphic novel. So there were several teams working on it. I did one issue, and it was so much fun because I mean, who doesn't want to work on Godzilla, right?
I know, right?
And there was
So,
there
I
were
mean,
there
did you ink a lot of miniature, like city scenes and ships and tanks and armies, and was it, you know what I mean? The scale is so different when you work.
well, yeah, it is, and it actually it makes it easier because close-ups in the cities require lots of detail work, whereas you get the size of Godzilla, and then you're just shrinking all that. And it's just basically dots and lines.
Yeah.
The fun thing about doing Godzilla, though, is that it's so organic. He's got a lot of plates, a lot of scales, and stuff like that. And it's just basically you just go. You don't have to worry about ruling a line or you're just throwing ink, you know. And
what about the breath weapon was a color hold, I take it, right? Like you did that on another layer? Or you just indicated?
Well, it was in some of it. It was they did it on the other end because I mean this was the age of of
4-color separation.
Well, no, it was. I think it was computer coloring, so they could do it on their own. I didn't have to.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
I didn't have to redline it like back in the day.
Awesome.
I think you have a page you want to throw up.
I do indeed have a page, and I don't want to throw up. I want to share the page, though. Look at that. Check it out, y'all. Check it out.
Very cool.
Barbara's awesome Godzilla. I love that the face and expression. What I always loved about Godzilla was he almost has a lion face. Don't you think, Barb?
Yes.
And,
well, I think so.
God, it looks so cool.
And I mean, they gave him eyebrows. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
They gave him eyebrows so that he can show surprise, anger, bewilderment, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Sadness.
He can emote. I mean, a giant dragon from under the ocean can emote. That's just,
right. And well, the thing is, he's not only just an offshoot of a dragon. He's an offshoot of a dinosaur / dragon / sea monster. So you're kind of mixing 3 different cultures here, where you've got dragons, you've got dinosaurs, you've got sea monsters, and it's all rolled up into this scaly package that everybody seems to. And the thing is, audiences like Godzilla. They emphasize with Godzilla because he's been wronged, and he's a creature that's been created from the hubris of man. And
Swamp Thing.
They've
like Swamp Thing, yeah.
And so he's suffering because of humankind, and it's not his fault. And a lot of people kind of empathize with him, and he becomes their hero, an anti-hero.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, the empathizing with the giant monster that's roaring through the city, destroying everything. But again, it's beautifully written because what you got is like a tragic hero. It's almost like a rabid dog that it's not their fault. And
Cujo of the sea,
right? Cujo of the sea. It's interesting too, the parallel. Many years before Godzilla, there was King Kong, and the fascinating appeal of King Kong for me, besides the cool stop motion animation, which then was all the rage in the mid 20th century with Ray Harryhausen's films and Sinbad movies and so on, and we got to see a lot of ancient mythology brought to life from lots of different cultures through stop motion, way before CG effects. But back to King Kong, one of the appeals of King Kong was, again, it was a cautionary tale, man versus nature. Man mistreats nature, nature bites back. And bringing Kong to New York City and putting him sort of in a circus situation where he's oogled like a freak, and then he breaks out, wreaks havoc, and then they shoot him off the Empire State Building, and it's real tragic. All the versions are well done. To me, the one that really captured the pathos of Kong, the sadness of Kong's destiny to be killed, was the last one with Peter Jackson. They really amped up the emotion and the connection between the leading lady and Kong. And you get that, almost that, a lot of people don't know this movie, but some of you may, the Old Yeller feeling of, that's like my pet dog that we had to put down. It's like that. No, we don't want to hurt him really, but what else are we going to do? We're going to, tranquilize him, try to send him back, or
we can't let him run free. So this is something we don't want to do, but we're going to be forced to euthanize him. Right. And so the sort of the sadness of that, they really amped that up in the last one, but it still had the cool factor. And Jackson spent so much time on Skull Island, in some people's opinions, too much time with, dinosaur, stampedes and giant bug attacks and all sorts of crazy things like that. But then when we finally, I didn't even remember the vampire bat attacks till I watched it again recently. But he fights a bunch of giant vampire bats too. But at any rate, wow, rock on, man, rock on. Aaron, what about you, my friend? I know you're a fan of Japanese anime, which includes some kaiju stories. One might even argue that
all kaiju stories come from giant monsters. Almost all of them are from Japan, even Godzilla. I think the only one that's non-Japanese is King Kong.
King Kong, right.
Yeah, all the other ones come from Japan. So
even the giant robot storylines that we've talked about before, one might argue that part of the appeal is similar to the appeal of the giant monster, because again, some of these giant mechs that these characters get into, even they become monsters in their own way. What do you think is appealing, and why do you think crowds still show up at giant monster movies like Pacific Rim is a recent example?
Yeah, Pacific Rim, which was a love letter to like Godzilla and all of them. I don't know. I think it's just a spectacle of somebody destroying something that it's so big. I mean, you're having something. It's the same thing of like natural disaster movies that Roland Emmerich used to do.
Yes,
a tornado plane, but you have a monster. It's just the idea. People like the idea of mass destruction, and I mean, Godzilla was really born from World War II. I mean, so much of his stuff is tied to that.
Absolutely
idea
of
mankind's fear of nuclear destruction.
Yeah, like nuclear. What does nuclear fallout do to nature, and how does it mutate and twist and corrupt nature, and then how does nature fight back? Did you have a favorite as a kid watching these things?
I liked, like I said, I liked the Godzilla. One of my favorites, and I can. Here, let me.
Feel free to share
some images.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Okay, so these are kind of out of order, but I remember as a kid, this was one of my, and maybe this is stretching the idea of giant monster, but it technically is a giant monster. Are the Centrati.
Okay.
And these guys are 50 feet tall.
Okay.
So this is a reference. You can see a human by the foot.
Oh, wow.
That's them, and that's how big. This is my series called Robotech, Macross in Japan. But it was just the idea that you have giant monsters invading a city, but what if they were a complete military unit? Like they have a million ships in their fleet. They have mecha and armaments and guns, and not just rampage. And these guys are organized. And it was a reason in Robotech why their planes transformed, because you couldn't fight these guys. I mean, you were like no bigger than their foot. And so that's what was so cool in the series. I mean, watching Robotech again is like these little, they call them Micronians, which is humans. And when they encounter these guys, they encounter them in their planes, which are transformed into giant robots. But it's just, and the thing that's so cool about it is like they're actually in the middle of the city, and using skyscrapers as cover. So imagine like taking like a firefight, but put it on the scale of like using skyscrapers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this is what's so cool about the idea. And the Centrati in the series were bred for war. They were a genetically engineered race that were bred for war, and they're so good at it. And there's more to the story, but it was just because the whole story starts out with a giant alien spaceship crash landing on Earth, and then humans decide to band together to study this thing. And over 10 years, they study it and develop this technology called robotechnology based on the energy source and technology in the spaceship. And as a researcher, they realize that there's an alien force that may come looking for this, and they discover this Centrati through the research of the ship. And so they're like, well, we're going to transform our planes just to make sure. And so this is kind of like the big surprise when the Centrati do eventually invade to try to get their ship back. People are like, well, these planes are transforming. It's like, well, yeah, that's how we're fighting them hand to hand. So it was it took the giant monster concept
and took it up a notch.
Took it up a notch. Well, like these guys are organized or whatever. And I always thought that was such a cool idea as a kid. Just like, well, what if you went to Gulliver's Island and, you had the huge giant, and what if these people had like developed huge robots to fight you? They did it in Pacific Rim, which was, same idea, but instead of giant monsters, to try to organize military personnel with like giant robots and stuff of their own. So it just like was this huge stuff. The other one, again, is Evangelion. These are not robots.
Absolutely.
They're not robots. They're giant humanoids engineered from Eve. Or actually, Adam, and then there's Lilith. And if you know the Jewish folklore, Lilith. That's
absolutely.
Yep.
And so basically what they are is they develop these huge humanoid beasts, and they control them by this armor. They put all this armor on them to control them. That's why, like, when they get loose, they just tear apart the city. And the thing was so amazing to me about Evangelion, the scale, and this was more seen in the remake of the movies they did in the cartoon, was the fact that since they bleed, this is another one of my favorite images. I really like. I found this one online.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
And then I did a picture of Godzilla a while ago.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Very nice.
Oh, yeah. There's another one of Unit. So the thing that was so interesting that took me by surprise at Evangelion, there's one scene where because they're fighting angels, and there's a whole kind of mystery what the angels are. When the angels explode, like one of them explode, they have blood. They show a scene of an entire tidal wave of blood just destroying the city and drowning it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And it's one of those scales where you're like, oh my God. I mean, if you're talking in the movie, there's one where one of the units basically starts tearing apart another one of the units, like tearing his arms off, like basically disemboweling him and tearing his head off. And like, I remember him just like punching this thing's head in, and the eyeballs and blood just go scout. And they show buildings, and the buildings just being awash with blood and giant eyeballs rolling down the street. I mean, it's just like, and you're like,
it's a gore fest.
It's a gore fest, but on a scale that you can't imagine. It's just
like
so. I was just like,
movie on
giants,
right? Like Evil Dead with giants. Yeah,
it is, and it was just like when they saw it on that scale, I'm like, well, that's more horrific than I can imagine. Like the scale of what they're doing. So Evangelion took. Because Evangelion was took the giant monster genre, and that's what he originally ran with, did his own thing with it. But he just like, what if you add gore? And I'm like, oh, that completely changed the entire scope.
That changes the whole tone of it. Absolutely. I want to also get other takes before we come back to the second part, which we're going to talk about applying the giant monsters into stories that we're working on now, and if that would even work. Rob, what about you? Tell us some of your favorites as a kid and why they were, and what was the appeal of these giant beings to you?
Well, I can't remember the names of the movies. I probably should have looked them up beforehand, but there's one. I think it's Tarantula.
Oh yeah, remember that movie?
Remember where they're. It starts out as a regular sized tarantula, and then they do some sort of treatment to it, and it ends up eating cattle and
you guys,
stuff like. Is that scary or what?
Did you ever see the movie Eight-Legged Freaks?
Yes,
yes.
absolutely.
That was a comedy. I
Really
love
good
that
comedy.
movie.
Kind of slapstick comedy. But back to Tarantula, Rob. I think it was yet another toxic spill. It was an unintentional toxic spill, I think.
Right.
And it was in the desert Southwest, and this created the giant spider thing. They did a similar one, if you recall, with an Allosaurus, and it was called Valley of the Gwangi. I don't know if you remember that.
That was going to be the next thing I mentioned. Those were the two that I actually saw in the theater.
Okay.
The others I saw have seen since then on television. Either Svengoolie or when I was younger, when I was still a kid. Ours were, I think, were on Sunday afternoons. And I didn't see a whole lot of these. I don't know that I've ever seen King Kong all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces over the years, but I've never seen the original I'm talking about.
The black and white
motion one.
Mm-hmm.
But the first King Kong I saw was Dino De Laurentiis' piece of crap King Kong version. I mean, it was kind of interesting, but they tried to play up the fact that he had a giant robot that they were using to make Kong, and it's only on screen for like 10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
And the rest of it is Rick stuntman Rick Baker.
In a costume.
In a costume, the rest of the movie, and you're going, that's not a freaking robot, So but. And then
Rob's like, I've seen a robot. I know what a robot looks like. That's not a robot.
I know. Robot. I watched Forbidden Planet.
I watched Lost in Space. I know.
Which is I never cared for Lost in Space. I was always a Star Trek fan.
Right.
But anyway, those are the ones I remember. And there's probably there was a whole series of those kind of movies where they had giant creatures of one type or another. But I remember the tarantula one. I was very young when I first saw it. I had nightmares about spiders for weeks afterwards.
Arachnophobia.
I mean, the first spider they showed was as big as your hand, and then of course it grew 40 feet tall or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But even the original one, the original size was scary. And at that time they were always talking about, they're poisonous. Well, we know now they're not. They do bite, but it doesn't really have a poison in it. But
at that scale, is poison really your biggest poison? It poisons me after it crushes me in half, right?
At the giant size, it doesn't matter. And I seem to remember, I don't know if it was Mighty Joe Young or Conga that I saw in the theater around that same time. But I don't know which one it is. I think it's Conga, which is kind of a in between Mighty Joe Young and King Kong.
Yeah.
Which was and then the Valley of Gwangi, which was the first one of those I saw. It was actually in color.
Yes, it was.
Others were in black and white. It was really impressive. But the stop motion was fascinating to watch, and the way they incorporated it with the live action.
Absolutely.
Was really interesting.
The appeal for me, was that stop motion effective, the power of making that look like these clay models were interacting with the actors, and it was rear projection primarily, but they did just a fantastic job of color grading it and matching it so that it looked like, the cowboys were literally roping a giant, Allosaurus. And it was kind of the precursor to Jurassic Park. It was just the early, like, what if dinosaurs were still around? And there were
we just saw the latest one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Was it okay? Was it
I'm hearing mixed reviews.
I heard it was kind of
it was good, but it couldn't match the last few. It was kind of we kind of went out with a whimper instead of a bang.
It's funny in Jurassic Park that all the dinosaurs are natural living animals, and they spend all their time like basically hunting humans. And I'm like, what time have you seen like a bear or tiger because I live up in like cougar country. We don't see cougars hunt. Well, there's other types of cougars, but we don't.
I was
gonna say,
but we don't. But you don't see cougars hunting humans, and like they don't even come into the city. So I always thought it was weird that like the dinosaurs not only are hunting humans, but actively hunting. I'm like, that doesn't seem like an animal. They would just be hunting each other. They probably, I don't know. You gotta have dinosaurs chasing people,
it'd
but
be a boring movie if they.
It would be a boring movie.
There was a lot of fan service in it. Let's put it that way.
A lot of fan service.
A lot of fan service.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's
that's why they
the
made it.
one, right? It's the last one. They're going to go out with a,
Gotta go with a bang. Hopefully, but
it's always
sounds
the
like
last
it was a whimper,
one, right?
Just
like Superman's really did, right? It's the last movie, right?
Sure he is. What about you, Rory? Talk to us, my friend. You're younger than most of us here, so I'm sure there'll be some more unique influences and inspirations.
Sure. So, growing up, my siblings and I always watched the Sci-Fi Channel before it got like revamped. So it was back when you could like get in halfway through a movie, and if you missed the first half of the movie, you had no idea what was going on. It was just whatever random movies they were showing, MST3K and all that, all the B movies.
Oh yeah.
But Godzilla was definitely number one.
Absolutely.
I even had for Christmas, my parents got me the little animatronic one that would walk and scream, and it was cool. As I got older, though, and I got in, like Aaron said, with the anime stuff, when I found Neon Genesis Evangelion, that just changed the whole monster genre. And anything with like that deep philosophy or a theological twist always piques my interest.
Always piques your interest.
Just to see what they do with it.
Well, I'm curious, too, as to your taste regarding something like Transformers. Some people might argue that those giant robots are also giant monsters in their own way because they are sentient and they do have their own agenda.
Alien.
A little more sci-fi. What did you think of Transformers? I had no connection to them. That was way after my childhood.
Yeah, so I was born in 87. And so my brother had like the original, he was 9-10 years older than me, so he had like the original Transformers experience. When I started watching it, they were doing the Beast Wars thing. It was all CG, and so that didn't really do it for me. It was interesting, but I like the Transformers that transformed into vehicles. That was
I never got the animal ones.
I never understood it.
I mean, I know a lot of people, and I guess the new movie's doing the Beast Wars.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I know a lot of people really like them, but I didn't
think they were that good.
Like,
I love the idea.
Well, Voltron did it like
they
were like mechanical lions, but these are supposed to look like flesh and blood lions. And I don't understand.
You're like, what?
You really have to suspend disbelief.
Oh, that's silly.
It's definitely for the kids.
Yeah. That is silly.
I think there's always been some of a huge fascination for children.
Yes.
For these. I mean, my son was rabid for Godzilla from a very young age. And obviously, as you can tell from all my props here,
I love that.
Actually,
that's so cool.
I love that.
This is like big guy. Yes.
Look at that.
These were actually gifts to my son when he was young. And this was back when the camcorders were these big, massive things you stuck on your shoulders. And you put a regular VHS tape in it. And you could do stop motion with these things. And my kids would set up these huge Hot Wheels cities, and they dragged the Ghostbuster houses or buildings out and everything like that. And then they would stop motion this guy going through it, and it looked fantastic. And they spent more hours doing that than I could even count, because it was fascinating to them. The whole stop motion monster making their own movie would keep them occupied for hours and hours. I mean, it was great because I had deadlines to meet, so they'd be up here.
It's like, here, kids, go do this for a while. Yeah,
but I think it speaks. The big monsters speak to something in childlike in all of us.
It's larger than life.
Yes.
Yeah, dinosaurs are the same way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember being a kid?
I got all those too.
I'm sure that and I'm sure that you guys learned about the dinosaurs. As a kid, one of the first things I memorized was, that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's a Triceratops. That, you know what I mean? And I knew
just in case
all
you
that
came across
stuff.
them, you knew what you were in for.
It was bizarre. Why? I mean, but again, I think I think it has something to do with the psychology. You know, as a child, you're small and basically powerless. So you can live out a lot of power fantasies or doing things through these creatures. I think one reason the Hulk is so popular among younger readers is that same idea that, you know, I'm angry at my brother or sister or my mom and dad or my whoever at school. And if I could just become the Hulk and I'll show them, you know, it's that sort of surrogate for anger and expression that's, you know, probably
that's an interesting take, because I would have thought the exact opposite, because with the original TV show it was all about controlling your emotional outburst.
Right well, that's the message, but as a child not thinking so deeply about it, it's more just living out the power fantasy at an earlier age. You know, Godzilla then becomes, you know, your other hero, whether it's Superman or whoever,
Trust me,
or the kaiju.
I have an almost 4-year-old grandson, and his favorite thing to do with all these things is to smash them together.
Yes, smash. That's awesome.
I think with Godzilla, when I was young, it was the first time I realized that companies just like rehash ideas to get as much money out of it. When they came out with Mecha, back in the old films, Mecha, I'm like, give the guy a break, quit bringing him back.
Mecha
there it is.
Oh yeah, there it is. So Barb, do you have any more pages you can find and share with us?
I don't right now.
I was hoping you did. But that's no matter. I wanted to take us a little bit into an unexpected world here and talk about giant monsters in terms of epic fantasy. There's something about the epic fantasy where we automatically accept giant monsters such as
dragons,
cave trolls, obviously dragons,
ogres,
balrogs, you know, demons from the ancient world, that sort of thing.
Giant spiders and Lord of the Rings.
Spiders, right? How horrible was that for all of us who were around?
I was like watching like this.
Yeah, exactly. So again, when we have, I think it has a lot to do with the childlike fairy tale nature of epic fantasy. That again, in fairy tales, anything goes. So giant monsters are no big deal. Who are some of your most memorable epic fantasy giant monsters? And then we'll go to comics. But Barb, what about you? Like from the epic fantasy literary world, comic world, movie world, doesn't matter.
Lord of the Rings. It was totally Lord of the Rings. I mean, they had dragons, they had huge giant eagles, and the orcs were scary. The Nazgul, they're huge on their monster horses.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to the old David and Goliath syndrome, where there are these massive, scary things, and yet humans can prevail against them. You know, they can either through cunning or strength or a combination of both, we can overcome our fears, which in this regard is very physical fears, these huge monsters we can prevail and overcome.
That's an interesting take on the appeal, and we'll explore that a little more when we start talking about applying these creatures to our stories. But the larger the villain, right, then the more heroic the win or victory over that villain. One thing I love about Lord of the Rings was, and I'm sure you did too, was the twist he threw in even when he wrote these, which was right after World War II. I think the last one was written in the early 50s, but Return of the King. Eowyn's victory over the king of the Nazgul, because she's a woman. And it's foretold. He actually brags because he doesn't know yet. And he says, and this is right out of the book, no man can kill me, right? And she takes off the helmet and says, I am no man. Whack.
Yes.
Right. So that whole, you know, even the little, you know, that's such a nice little riddle and trick that he used, again, taken from the Western European traditions of riddles and rules that you can work your way around to win something that seems impossible to win. What about you, Rob? Any favorite epic fantasy monsters?
Well, I always like that the scene in the Fellowship of the Ring where they're running from the Balrog, and Gandalf turns and plants his staff and yells, "You shall not pass."
That's my professors too.
When I read it in the book, it was the scene in that book that stuck with me.
Wow.
That one lone man against this gigantic fire-breathing, made of fire creature.
David and Goliath.
And he's standing on that bridge and plants that staff and essentially tells that SOB he ain't getting past me.
He's not getting past him.
And then he tells everybody else, "Run, fools!
Run!" Yeah, that's.
Did Peter Jackson do right by you?
And yet he stops and turns and faces it. So yeah, that whole bit, that's that David and Goliath thing. And then
so glad
essentially
you
gets
brought that
pulled into the abyss.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the most, to me, that's the most powerful scene in the whole series. Everything else was lower than that in my
secondary.
estimation.
Yeah,
man, that
when
was
you saw the
just
movie,
incredible.
Did Peter Jackson do right by you? Was that scene?
He did. He did.
Lived up to your expectations?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it did. I'm going, oh, here we come. Here we come. And then, and then the way they shot it and everything was just, perfect. And in fact, back in the day when I read the book, I actually stopped after I read that scene and painted it in Dayglow colors so that in black light it would glow.
Yeah. How cool
the Balrog
that?
Would glow. So that was
awesome.
that was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, that scene just really grabbed me. So, and the rest of the book was a slog after that.
Yeah, it's not the easiest read.
No, it is not. It is not.
It does drag. It feels like a long journey.
Well, the thing is, and it gets more and more somber, and the skies get darker, and it before the end, you're going, God, please, take me out. I'm ready to go. Just kill me.
One of my favorite scenes, though, along the lines of that tone, is at the end of Jackson's version with the two towers, and Frodo feels that, and he just basically is ready to. What are we fighting for, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
And Sam says
Sam
that
gives
there
him that lecture,
is some good in the world, and it's worth fighting for. And I thought, they did a great job. The screenwriters did a great job distilling all that difficult writing into just a few lines, and the hope that it was worth fighting for and that it was going to be okay in the end.
And the fact that this was written right after World War II is very telling.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can see parallels
and yet
he
claims that it did not inspire him. He wasn't writing about baloney.
How can you live through that and not have it subconsciously in your head?
It was
there. J.R.R. Tolkien served in World War One. You guys know that.
He served in World War One, correct?
Yeah, most of Lord of the Rings is based on the experiences in World War One.
That's where all the Frodo walking through Mordor, and when
basically that's no man's land.
The line is delivered that he says, one simply doesn't walk into Mordor. The very air is a poison.
That's all based on no man's land.
That's based on
with the chemical
War
warfare and all that. All that. I don't know how much he was in. I think he was more inspired not by World War II, but more inspired by his own experiences in World War One. Yeah,
and of course from afar.
He lived through two world wars.
Yeah. He lived through 2 world wars. So, I can guarantee you that the Stukas dive bombing Britain probably inspired some Nazgul that looked, a lot like those aircraft. But that being said, that story is full of giant monsters. And again, it speaks to what Barb observed earlier, that the David and Goliath idea, the greater the threat, and the banding together of all these people, just regular people. And the you know, the ultimate message of Lord of the Rings, part of it is the idea that the smallest person can make a difference, and that sort of that theme of if we all just join together to fight this larger evil, that we can overcome it. And so it was a message of hope there. But using the giant monsters was a great way to help that along. Rory, did it live up to your expectations, the Balrog scene? Did you read it before, or had you seen the animated series?
read it.
Before?
I read it after I saw the animated series that we discussed in a episode earlier on.
Episode. Yeah.
My grandmother made me read The Hobbit like 3 or 4 times, and so I had
the grandma,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's kind of
my sister and I would go see like opening day Lord of the Rings, and once I had seen them all, I went back and read the books, and man, that first one is. That is marching through Mordor.
Yeah.
It's a slog.
It is a slog. But just a little note here: a lot has been written about the creation of the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons, and there are some scholars who keep up with these sort of pop culture creations that say that it was very much the Moria sequence in Lord of the Rings that inspired Gary Gygax and his team to create the original Dungeons and Dragons game. The idea of a fellowship of adventurers having to go underground through a dangerous mine or any kind of labyrinth idea and survive, and making them stick with not just rolls of the dice for their fate, but also, you know, they had to carry their supplies and all of that. It very much mirrors the Tolkien experience through Moria. So, yeah, definitely. What about you, Aaron? Talk to us, man. Epic fantasies that are some of your favorite giant monsters.
I'm trying to think of any giant. I know probably more of my epic fantasies are going to come from video games growing up.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I was a big fan of Shadow of the Colossus.
Okay.
Rory probably knows this one.
They re-released that like a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, a couple years ago they did. And the whole premise of the game is you're bringing, I think it's like his girlfriend or his wife, they never really explained, to this temple, and she's dead or comatose or something. They never quite explain. And there's a voice that tells you if you go basically kill these 12 giant colossi or creatures, that you're resurrector, and there's like more to it than that. But the whole game is literally going. You're this little dude, and you're literally going and climbing up these giant, colossi and killing them and stabbing them in the head. And each one is a puzzle you have to figure out. It's fantastic. As far as like giant creatures, that's probably some of my favorite ones. I'm trying to think in fantasy. I mean, like, how big are we talking? Are we talking like Godzilla size, or just?
It doesn't matter. Just larger than human. It can be 25 feet tall. It can be 100 feet tall.
I really like the rock biters and the Neverending Story. I thought they were cool.
That's an interesting reference. I'm glad you brought that in.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones as far as like giant.
And that was a movie aimed at children.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the original. I'm not the original book. I'm not sure was the guy who wrote the book hated the movie so much he told him to take his name off the movie.
Disowned it. Spectral Skull says,
"I tried
no
to read
man
the
of
book,
woman born feel like it harkened back to Macbeth. It did indeed.
Absolutely.
Did. That's a good observation. And he also says, he asks, Gandalf is like a demigod, right? I mean, he is a Maiai and all. Yeah, he's actually also called an Istari, which is a race of angelic-like guardians from the earlier ages of Middle-earth sent to guard. His particular jurisdiction was guarding the hobbits and the Shire, I should say. So, yeah, he's a highly powered individual himself. So is Saruman. And Radagast, who's brought into the Hobbit a little more.
Can I throw in
I'm certainly liking. I don't know if they're creatures, but I've been replaying Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't know if you guys know.
Haven't played it yet, but somebody said I was playing
it. What's this one?
So Horizon Zero Dawn is basically you play as this girl Aloy in the future, And
like a
there's all these
post-apocalyptic.
but there's you're in a natural world, but all the animals are robotic dinosaurs and robotic, giant robotic, like T-Rex, and then they have bison or whatever, and you got to figure out how to hunt these things down. You can look. I think they're making a TV series out of it now. I think they're
okay.
And they just released the second one.
Is that similar to there was a movie that was popular a few years ago? You guys probably know about this more. Attack on Titan.
Attack on Titan. That is that's based on a manga,
Japanese
anime,
manga.
And then they made a live action movie. And
it's giant humans, right? It's giant.
I was always wondering what the secret was. My friend finally told me like what the big secret was about it. I'm like, no, it's stupid. I don't like that. I have my own theories why they were doing it. And I've been that way in movies. Like there's been movies where I like you'll bring about a premise. I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool if it's that. And then if it's something else, like, no, that's stupid. I don't like that. So I've done that before. Yeah, the Attack on Titan was and it was cool because they would use these sort of like rope sort of harnesses that would like almost like these, like a Spider-Man, they'd shoot from the hips, like these spikes, and they spike in the buildings, and then they would like propel them through the air so they can fight these giant things through the air. It was a really cool concept. I started watching the anime, and I got through season 1, I think, and I didn't finish it. But and the humans, it's just like this walled city of like, I think the humans are like Germanic or something. They look completely fantasy. But then you have these giant humanoid titans climb over the wall, and they just have these huge grins and smiles. They're very creepy looking.
It's very
I think there's even some with like no skin. It's
really reminded me. Yeah, it's really odd. You know what it reminded me of? I don't know if any of you guys saw this recent movie. I think it was last summer that came out, The Green Knight, which is kind of an art film.
Yeah,
I did want to see that. I never got.
Probably doesn't hold up the story.
No, it doesn't. But there's a very odd sequence in it where they use Celtic giants, very similar to what you're describing with Attack on Titan, where they're just giant humans, and they look like spectral, ghostly things, and they're not explained. He just sees them in a vision, and they make very eerie sounds. And it gives the whole story just its own odd, unsettling atmosphere, very similar to Spirited Away when you see a forest creature that's a giant or something.
I was always a fan of Lovecraft as far as fantasy.
Yes,
I like Lovecraft.
Yes, that was the other
Lovecraft
thing.
is good.
Lovecraft has some good giant, the old ones, good outer space creatures coming to destroy the Earth from another dimension.
Right.
Well, we don't even have to go into Marvel because Doctor Strange, but even he's always guarding against Lovecraftian style beings that are going to come through another doorway and
like
destroy
the big
us.
octopus in the new movie. I can't remember the name of that.
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to see it now that it's streaming. But here's the other thing: even the spandex superhero crowd is fighting giant monsters. Think about it.
Yeah.
They're and they're
JLA,
fighting giant monsters in the movie, in the JLA, right? And
the Thor movies.
They're giants. They're larger than life. So this brings me full circle around to, as comic book creators, as we're writing our stories. Obviously, if you've got a realistic based story, it's going to be hard to bring in a giant like that. But I'm going to go ahead and throw it out to everybody because I want everybody's take on this, pro and con. Like, Barb, would you ever consider bringing a giant monster into Divinity? Why or why not? And if you couldn't do it conventionally, could you do it in a dream sequence or something like that?
No, you're muted.
You're muted.
I would never have a physical monster. A dream sequence is a unique idea, and it could probably be something to do with the id, because if you really look at Divinity, it's very metaphorical that Divinity is this little girl, and she's going up about this huge cabal. So you can see we've got a David and Goliath thing going on there with the cabal. She could absolutely have a dream where she's going up against a huge monster that would represent in her subconscious the evil cabal. So I do have a metaphorical large monster in Divinity.
Oh, good. hopefully, yeah, that's a tease for what's coming down the road. Because I've been lucky enough to read issue 3, and it's not in that one. So,
yes, because he's going to do a cover for me.
And yes, I'm excited. I've already got one in my head. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
It's one of 3 artists I've lined up. I'm not going to release the other 2 names, but they're pretty awesome.
Yes, they are. I'm in very good company. Rob, what about you? Would you bring a giant monster into the story you're working on, that you're creating?
Well, I'm not the writer of the book I'm working on. It's the comic I'm working on right now is that Boston Bombers.
That's right. You were telling me about that.
I think the monsters in that are political in nature. They're metaphorical rather than an actual big monster. But it's an organization that it's essentially the Roman Empire.
Oh, okay.
That has lasted into the 20th century.
And that could be a giant monster.
And this guy who's trying to, it's become quote unquote domesticated. And this guy who he kills off the emperor and takes over as the new emperor and wants to take it back to its closer to its more destructive and fascist origins.
That whole thing, yeah.
Well, that's interesting because even in Revelation, the beasts were considered the Roman emperors.
Yes.
That's one of the interpretations.
Absolutely.
And the 666 stood for, I think it was Nero. Some people have said was the actual beast that they meant by doing 666. In numerology, I think his number comes to 666. So, but that's a whole other kind of monster we're talking.
Yeah, that's a different monster
now.
But would you do a creature? Would you want to do it? Let's say it this way: if you're not writing it, would you want to draw a comic that had like giant creatures in it? Would that be something you want to do?
I've never had the opportunity. It would be kind of fun to do, I would think, especially if it's because like Barb was mentioning about the organic stuff on Godzilla. That's a lot more fun to draw.
Yes, it is.
Than getting out your ruler and making all these straight lines, like she was talking about. It's like if the first few pages of the Boston Bombers is out on the savannah in Africa, and everything's organic. So I don't,
you're slinging down ink.
Yeah, and so you can, and exactly, you can just kind of, you could do shapes like that, and it works. For the tall grass, you just go, and there it is. So
you would enjoy
lines.
Based on what you just said, you would enjoy drawing like a King Kong comic book, probably.
I would. I doing a lot of research to draw apes would be a lot of fun.
I did 12 issues of Planet of the Apes. I know ape fur.
Oh, good for you.
Well, that's a little different because they're humanoid. They're more humanoid in shape. An actual gorilla has very short legs and very long arms, and their gait is completely different. King Kong wasn't a true gorilla. He was kind of a cross. He was more humanoid than a true gorilla is. He didn't have that huge forehead that most gorillas have.
Yeah, it didn't have like a silverback. Yeah, it was a little bit.
He was almost chimpanzee-like, almost. He had more human features. I think that was done purposely to make him more relatable, appealing to the audience. Yeah, well,
absolutely, it was.
It's easier to imagine yourself as King Kong if he's not not that ugly. I mean, he's ugly. He's not to the point of alien ugly.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. What about you, Rory? Would you consider bringing a giant monster into, for example, Steam Patriots as the writer?
I'm going to say yes. And because Scott and I are usually of one mind, he would probably also feel there was a place for it. Because we're so steampunk, I have 2 schools of thought on it, that we would make some giant machination.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, that would be one thing. The other one,
really fun. Yeah.
I have one word for you.
Yeah.
Kraken.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. That might be in another comic I'm working on with Steam Patriots.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah. Good idea.
Steampunk monster,
Okay.
mechanized.
No, but expand a little bit on. So you'd want to make it along the lines of the steampunk idea of a clockwork, a giant mechanical creature. Okay.
With maybe multiple people running around up inside, going up and down ladders, making everything move,
An animated Trojan horse.
Yeah. And I can see it like traipsing through the shore, destroying British ships along the way or something, or making it a means of transportation, and war. But my second thought was, just like every culture has dragon myths, almost every culture also has giant myths. So the Native Americans had giant myths.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I always loved the picture of like the sleeping giant that just looks like a hill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
People like forget it's there until it wakes up. I like that too. I don't know if that would work in as well. That might be a little too supernatural, but yeah, I think
the world on the
work.
back of a turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the world on the back of a turtle. And no one's mentioned, we brought up Lord of the Rings and mentioned almost all the giant creatures, but I consider Treebeard a giant.
Oh yeah,
he's not necessarily a monster, but he's
I was gonna
creature.
Say, growing up, like my dad's side's very Irish, mom's side is Slavic, and I love like folk tales and all the old stories. So all the Irish stuff, like Celtic, Brythonic, is so tied to Nordic. Yes. And then the Slavic is so close to like the Polish and the Germanic and the Nordic. It all kind of comes together. When I read Beowulf, man, as a kid, that just like lit up my world.
That did it for you, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you, man. It's like when I read Jason and the Argonauts, man. I was all there, the Hydra.
What was the what was the one movie with they battled that statue of Achilles and they had like the drain on the back of his heel or something?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's
same vein as Clash of the Titans.
Yes. It was probably a Harryhausen.
That was probably a Harryhausen movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I used to love watching Harryhausen movies.
Oh yeah.
Those are full
skeletons.
The skeletons and the giant statues that would come to life, and then as they got more advanced and cheesier than cheesier than you could possibly believe, you had Patrick Wayne starring as Sinbad.
Sinbad, you had a big octopus there. Yep, 20,000 fathoms.
A giant lion and a centaur. I thought, man, that's cool.
Who was the one with the giant monitor lizard?
Oh, that was the first one.
20 Million Miles to Earth. 7.
Oh, are you talking about a Sinbad movie?
I don't remember.
I think that was the first Sinbad
where they did,
movie.
Yeah, they just 50s. Had a picture of a monitor lizard.
Yeah, and it was a monitor lizard. I remember that. Yeah.
And then they had little people in front of it, so it was superimposed.
Yeah.
To make the monitor lizard look like it was as big as a 20-story building.
Very cool. I want to go to Aaron here now. I know that in your stuff, there's all kinds of epic monsters and creatures, and so you've probably had the opportunity because you do the fantasy stuff, so the sci-fi as well. Have you got a story right now that's going to have a giant monster in it? Giant.
Giant. Let me see.
Relative to the cast members, I guess is Obsolete's going to have a giant, but you're not writing that. You're just drawing.
No,
that, right?
No. There's.
Just
I've already done it.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I've already done the giant monster.
What's the name of this creature?
The Divine Wrath.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I did all the them
That's
fighting.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how did they bring down the wrath, the Divine Wrath? How did they? They?
I can't tell you that.
You don't want to give that away, do you?
That's a major crux of my
kids.
It's a minor, kind of a major turning point in my story.
Okay.
So you have to read it to find out.
Aha. Right.
So, and it's only in the middle of the story. So we get to this in the middle of the story.
Nice. Very cool.
Talking about D&D earlier, I should go grab my monster manual because there's some genius ideas for monsters in there. Those incredible ideas.
Oh yeah. Now what, Barb, if you're gonna bring one in, is it metaphoric? Can you tell us that? Does it represent?
I already talked about Divinity, where the Cabal is the metaphorical giant. If
Right.
I had a chance to do a different comic, I would love to do a Dungeons and Dragons type thing. Oh yeah, I'd be right there.
I'm with you.
I want to do dragons. I want to do big old ogres.
How cool would that be, right?
Be awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Rob? Do you want to draw dragons? I think we've got a team here that could do like a D&D style book.
I would not mind being the artist on the book Barb wants to do.
Yes.
To draw the D&D type characters. That would be a lot
You guys
of
know
fun.
why dragons look like dinosaurs, right?
Talk to me, man. Talk to me.
You didn't know that? They actually.
Because the word dinosaur didn't come about until like 18 something, right?
Well, they found dinosaur bones and they thought they were dragon bones.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
So
the
that's
whole
kind
bit
of-
about the Cyclops was actually, from what I've read, someone found an elephant skull,
Mm-hmm.
and it had the big
Right,
hole
always
for the
one hole.
trunk.
For the trunk,
Yeah,
and they thought it was a Cyclops.
Thought that was an eye.
A lot of that stuff
yeah.
came from them finding bones, but that's why the T-Rex and the dragon look so similar, because they would find remnants of these.
Same with the some of the chimera, like the Sphinx things, like with the lion with the eagle beak with the lion body and the wings.
Yeah,
sure. The Triceratops has a hooked beak. The feet look like lion, like it would be a cat.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, dinosaurs essentially are still with us in the form of birds. Some of them had beaks.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go.
I don't think they actually started studying dinosaurs as legitimate extinct species until like the late 1800s.
Correct.
Victorian era.
Most of it, but they kept finding
that's
this
my
stuff,
understanding.
Yeah.
Actually,
But they
I
kept
did
finding this stuff, and they didn't know what it was. Oh, this must be evidence of mythological creatures that exist.
What
So,
about what about Loch Ness? Is that
Nessie's real? Yeah.
Is that a plesiosaur? That just
the only thing I would say,
Leoplerodon.
if it is a
Near
plesiosaur, you would think they would have some sort of population in there. Like, if there was only one, it would have died years ago. If there's more than one, you think we would have seen in other areas. I mean, there would have been some population. That's my biggest spawn with some of these cryptoid is even Bigfoot. I mean, I know there's a lot of land and stuff where Bigfoot can exist, but you think there would be some sort of population, especially the plesiosaur. Like you would see it in other lakes or other areas. I mean, I can't imagine it not reproducing to some capacity. And if it's just one, then that's what gets me. I'm like, why aren't we seeing more?
One that lives a long time.
Yeah.
Well, it could be more than one being perceived as the one.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be the fact that maybe we
one.
are seeing more than one, and we just keep thinking it's the same one.
Well, because the Bigfoot theory is that also that because you have a Sasquatch in the northwest, you have a skunk ape in the southeast, you have the Yeti in the Himalayas, and so on.
That's all the same species,
right? Yeah. And they're adapted to their landscape and their
same
environment,
family,
and so
different
on.
genus.
Right. Yeah. So the idea there is that's a giant cryptid, as we like to call them now, but in my book, it's still a giant monster. I mean, is it possible, you think, have primitive beings like that are still running around that haven't
Thomas
been...
Jefferson thought so.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Right?
That's the whole the Lewis and Clark expedition. Part of the reason he wanted it because he was dead set that there are still giant monsters in the West. And that was one of the things they had to look for. I'm actually writing a story of that too. I'm doing the Lewis and Clark, but a horror story.
Oh, how cool, man! That's awesome. We were having fun talking about giant monsters, Brent, and just to catch you up briefly, we started with our favorites, and everyone shared that, and then we started with mythological creatures and why they're important in epic fantasy, and everything from Godzilla to the Balrog. We've talked about. But I was going to ask you some of the same stuff. Number one, what's your favorite giant monster from back in the day? Do you have a fave?
Not really. When Kong versus Godzilla Godzilla versus Kong, the movie came out, I was like, I'll see it, but I really don't have a horse in this race. So, yeah. So it was okay. But, I mean, at the same time, like I loved Pacific Rim. There's just
we talked about that too.
A giant robot hitting a monster with a ship. I just loved it.
Something cool about that.
I'm gonna have to watch it now. I have not seen it, so
I'm gonna have to watch the second one.
Yeah.
You know,
Pacific
my problem
Rim is fun.
in the old days when it was a guy in a rubber suit walking around a model. I couldn't make the leap to say, "Oh wow, that's a giant monster." I was just like, "There's a guy with some funky pajamas," and now with the special effects being what they are, I'm like, "Yeah, this is what I've been missing." So,
were you as fired up? Rob and I and Rory and others, everyone pretty much agreed that when the Balrog showed up in Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring, that was one of those wow moments of, yeah, they did it right. You know, did you have that feeling as well?
Oh yeah. Although, have you noticed whenever a giant monster shows up on the scene, the first thing they do is affect a giant roaring pose, followed by a giant roaring roar. It's almost like, I mean, every giant monster there is. That's why I loved the Avengers, because the Hulk was the first one who ever roared back. I love that.
Yeah. That's very cool. That's a great observation.
Mm.
In your story, which is more reality based with science fiction overtones, would you consider including a giant monster? Why or why not?
I would if it maybe probably not, but maybe the secret behind Kalis is I don't know if it would make sense to do it.
Okay.
And
what about in Cape Town?
In Cape Town, not really at all.
You wouldn't open a doorway with the Tesseract and bring in a lot of giant creatures that look like, undersea sea serpents.
Space whales?
Space whales.
I love that in Avengers. They were scary. The space whales.
The Leviathan,
Going through through New York.
Going through the city and tearing everything up.
I don't know. I feel like Cape Town is, the whole idea is almost like, what if you could be a superhero? Not because you had powers. It would be like the real world. But what if it was kind of acceptable to do it? So the real question would be, how would you feel if, like, a kaiju showed up on the news?
That would be awesome.
Everybody thinks it would be awesome right until a kaiju steps on their house.
It's all fun and games.
It's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the certainly in the context of the storytelling, it would be visually spectacular. I'd love to see that.
And my first thought is if something like that ever happened, my son would have to go and fight it.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Yeah.
I just always people always say, like, what if that ever happened? I'm like, well, considering our gravity, it would probably just collapse in a pile of mush under its own weight. It would just die. I don't think anything is able to.
That's an interesting point. Coming from a different dimension, and you weigh, 500 tons, and all of a sudden, like, oh, I can't move.
And you just. I always thought that was a very clever way to save us from the aliens in the War of the Worlds. They caught a
viruses with the virus.
They caught a cold.
They caught a cold and died.
And they did the exact same thing, only a computer virus in Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same idea. But that classic story that H.G. Wells wrote, and even in the remake in the past decade and a half or so, really caught that whole idea of they're so superior to us, the technology, the this, the that, but their immune systems can't handle, all the viruses in the air, and they
M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, water.
Yeah,
that one.
So come to a planet that's 70% water.
For me, it's like, don't come here. It's 75% water. What's wrong with you?
And there's a really good line in Jurassic Park. I think it was the original one where
the only good one.
Sadly,
that somebody says they're so busy asking, can we do this?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's asking, should we do this?
Should we do? Yeah, cloning the dinosaurs. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. That's enough. Again, that has the cautionary tale similar to Godzilla. Really, if you think about Jurassic Park, but Michael Crichton again was echoing themes from his previous novels, namely with Jurassic Park, he was echoing Westworld. But even in the Andromeda Strain, you know, he was always doing this sort of epic, oh man, we should never have done this, and it just causes havoc, you know, worldwide.
I'm not giving you any huge spoilers away here, but in the last Jurassic movie, they've done that as well when they're messing with locusts, and they create giant locusts. And again, it's one of those that backfires on them. It's one of those, we shouldn't have done this.
Yeah,
yeah, you know, hey, this would be cool. Let's make giant. No, that would not be cool.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
I know, right?
Yeah, how come they never make dinosaurs that like drop candy canes, or you know, like or shoot cotton candy or people, or you know, like make rain? How come they don't make dinosaurs that make rain? They just make dinosaurs that eat people.
Depending on where you stand, and it might make rain.
It might make rain, yeah. Depending. What about and really, let's talk about this for a moment. The abominable snowman in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did it scare you guys when you were a kid?
No, I loved it.
Nope.
I loved it too. It scared me though when I was
Remember,
I
wasn't a typical girl. I loved all this stuff.
I thought it was really cool though, you know, Yukon Cornelius, you know, turning.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah. my buddy tried to convince his wife to name their first child Yukon Cornelius, and she was adamantly opposed.
Yeah.
Hey, that's who Rory looks like. No, that's it. You just you gotta do a every now and then, and it would just
you have a pipe
so
too?
well. Yeah, I think he did.
Oh man,
yeah, what a character, man! What a
I got so much for that. I need the hat. Where's the hat?
When I was a little girl, and the big thing for me was watching the lizard chase Johnny Quest, and then I go to Rudolph, and they cheesy.
Yeah, it was cheesy, right? The lizards and Johnny Quest. Yeah, that brought up a lot. That was what a great movie to be made.
The Komodo dragons.
Yeah, Komodo dragons and Johnny Quest, and then you go to the abominable snowman and Rudolph. I'm like,
they had an abominable snowman. They also had a giant id monster, very similar to Forbidden Planet in Johnny Quest.
Mm-hmm.
They also had
after the light.
Yeah, and even their mummy was giant, or was it just?
It was bigger than normal. Bigger, yeah, it was tall.
I think the mummy was larger than normal.
I think they wouldn't touch Johnny Quest because of Hachi.
Well, yeah, but that could actually, if it was written well, it could be so cool.
Yeah, I would love to see it
best
done.
friends.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, if you just wrote him as a cool character, man, he's cool. I mean, both those boys are just awesome. It was one of those things, as a kid. And Barb, I'm glad you said that you loved all that stuff, even as a little girl, because what it tells us is it doesn't matter that there weren't any girls in the original Johnny Quest. You loved it anyway, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you didn't care. Did you freak out and go, man, I wish there were girls in this show? You didn't care?
Nope, didn't care. It was all about the story and the adventure and the excitement. And it was the same for Lord of the Rings. I mean, how many heroines were there? And they added a few in the movie to kind of even it out. But there weren't that many, except for Éowyn.
No. Éowyn and Arwen slightly. Arwen's role is expanded for the film, obviously. But yeah. It did well. We brought that up too, Brent. That
we got Sailor Moon later on.
Yeah, epic. We got Sailor Moon. That's right. Epic fantasy is one of those worlds, genres, I should say, where giant monsters are just kind of expected. I mean, what's an epic fantasy without a few dragons and ogres and orcs and giant things?
I was too wrapped up in the story and the fantasy and the whole imagination of it to to sit there and go, well, I think this is unfair. They should have a woman. It wasn't even a part of my thinking at that point in my life. I was young. I was totally fascinated with the entire concept of dragons and orcs and stuff like that. I wasn't into the feminism thing at that, that came later in life. But I still don't make a huge fuss if it's a predominantly male dominated, because if it's a good story, it's going to override that.
Yeah, we did have Red Sonja too.
Oh, I love Sonja.
I have read Sonja. Absolutely. Yeah. Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman. I've done a lot of Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Now, hey, there were giant monsters in some of the Wonder Woman stories too, because I think there were. You got Greek mythology there, so you got a whole.
I've done Elf
library.
Quest, and that was very balanced with a male and a female.
Has anyone talked about Cloverfield yet?
No,
I was gonna bring that up. That was good.
Talk about Cloverfield, man.
That's by far my favorite Godzilla movie that didn't actually star Godzilla.
Oh, the whole world of it.
I mean,
they're good.
That's the one that made the most sense to me, because I mean, there's no mythos, there's no mythology. It's like sudden terrorists have attacked in New York. Oh, wait, but it's not a terrorist. Well, what is it? And everyone's running around going, what's happening? What's happening? That sounds about as real as it gets.
Yeah, I like that. And also, they took a page from that approach for War of the Worlds, where you really are seeing the whole battle through the eyes of the average person just trying to survive. Phil says, "Sup, Silverline peeps? Sup, Phil? We're just talking about giant monsters, man. Having a great night." So Cloverfield, did you like that ending in Cloverfield? I thought that was very terrifying. I thought it was like, wow, this is scary stuff.
That was the best part about Cloverfield. Was in a way, it was a very human story. So from start to finish, I think that anytime you get away from that in any kind of a movie, you start to lose any reason to really stick with it. It starts to become interesting, which is the first
four of those now?
Failure. What?
Is there 4 movies in the Cloverfield universe?
I think there were just 3.
What were they? Enlighten us, Brent.
10 Cloverfield Lane was the second one.
Yeah.
Okay. What
Cloverfield Paradox.
Yeah, the third one was the Paradox.
Is that the spaceship one?
Cloverfield Lane was really interesting because it was a
John
film
Goodman.
that wasn't about Cloverfield. It was about a girl who was running away from an engagement and then got in a car accident, woke up in a guy's bunker who said, the apocalypse has happened and we have to live down here forever. And it only started to become Cloverfield like towards the end.
Well, like the last 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was good though.
Mimicked the whole idea about Cloverfield, which is this is why I feel like they really kind of departed with the third one, and I thought it was such a mistake, because the coolest thing about the Cloverfield movies is that it's not about a giant creature attacking. It's about people going, what do I do? What do I do? And the drama that creates. And, there's army guys with rocket launchers getting stepped on left and right. And you'd think, oh, that's really cool. But that's also really noisy. And in the meantime, you've got people going, where's my brother? Where's my brother? He was just right here. And, oh, he's dead. Oh, I got to call my mom, and that sounds pedestrian, but really that's where the most gripping scenes.
That's where the drama is.
Yeah.
I agree. The scenes in War of the Worlds where the elder son in the family is just obsessed with joining the fight, wanting to go fight the creatures, and the father and the daughter are like, no, just we've got to find a safe place to, survive. And because again, in that particular case, the giant monsters were the tripods, and you didn't know what they were, and they had that weird sound that was, I think the sound design of that, as well as Cloverfield, the sound design made those movies so terrifying too. Just nightmarish sound. Phil says, "Cool deal. I just wrapped colors on a book with giant monsters."
Ooh,
well, that's awesome, man. But I think you've hit on, Brent, that the way to successfully integrate giant monsters into our stories, make certain the human interaction with each other in a terrifying, cataclysmic, apocalyptic situation caused by the giant monsters. That's what's going to sell it. That's what's going to connect it.
Did anybody watch Reign of Fire?
Oh,
yes.
Matthew McConaughey.
Yes.
Christian Bale.
That's a great one.
That was a good
That's
one.
a great. Oh, wow.
I mean, that was bringing dragons into the modern era and showing what kind of destructions it rained on London and stuff. Oh, that was scary as shit.
Yeah, that was good. Oh, that was a good movie.
Yeah,
I watched it again not too long ago.
Does it hold up, Rory? Because it's been years.
Gerald Butler was in it too.
Gerard Butler.
Yeah, Gerard Butler.
I mean, Gerard.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
it's I wouldn't say holds up. The idea of it's still solid, but some of the acting is like a little over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're digging around.
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey.
Does he? But wait. Does he just look at everyone at one point and go, "All right"? None of that. So
it's that whole concept of in our quest to, be bigger and badder and dig deeper than anybody and to do our technology and make a bigger city. They dig down too deep and they tap into something they shouldn't have. And they
they wake up a dragon like, don't.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Release doom upon the world.
Special effects wise, what's the most successful giant monster? You said Cloverfield, Brent. You sticking with that one?
That was actually done on the cheap, and
Blair Witch style.
Yeah, it is really hard to conceptually understand what the creature from Cloverfield even looked like. It was like a weird bat creature with scales and kind of winged, they never even really gave you a really clear picture of what it looked like. So I wouldn't
make them scarier that way.
Yeah. So
mine is definitely going to be, I think the Balrog is probably one of the best realized monsters I've ever seen. Although the giant monsters in Godzilla King of the Monsters are done pretty convincingly. You got the classics brought back in CG style. So you got Rodan and Mothra and Monster Zero, or Ghidorah if you prefer. But those were well done as well. I like the modern Godzilla. It's pretty.
The mother alien in Aliens.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
All that
real effect.
Oh yeah. Terrifying.
Freaks me out.
One thought of that we hadn't talked about is a movie.
You're not going to bring up my mom again, are you, Rob?
Well, if you want me to.
every stream, man. Every stream you bring it up.
Is actually 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Doug McClure.
The giant squid. It's not very well done
realized
in the Disney version, but the idea of it's pretty scary.
It is scary.
You got this sub that's so deep that the things really exist.
Yes, they do.
We found out. They found out that they actually do exist. That's pretty incredible too. But that's one we hadn't covered.
That would be a great opportunity for enterprising creators, comic book creators, but also filmmakers to return to that world and redo the Captain Nemo story. And because there's a very rich tradition there of not only sort of steampunk effects with the Nautilus itself, but also the sort of lost world idea that was very popular at the turn of the century. Arthur Conan Doyle was writing about it, and Wells wrote about it, of course.
And the sequel, Mysterious Island.
Island.
It gets into that sort of thing, that science gone awry, and giant bees and other creatures on the island. I forget what else is on that one. It's been a long time since I've seen that one. But
yeah, there's a giant crab on it.
How can we forget Tremors?
Oh,
man!
Oh my gosh! The blue collar monster movie.
We're getting deeper and deeper here. Yeah.
Yeah, you kept making.
Yeah, I know, right? It's that was a fantastic man. And again,
So good.
I think Brent solidified what makes the stories compelling, and I think Tremors has that too. It's just not only just the humor of that, but just relating to the people and their reactions to these things. That's what sells it. It's not, you can't just always focus on the supernatural elements and keep people interested. You have to focus on the realistic responses of the human beings and what they would actually do. What I love about that aspect of good storytelling is when human beings in stories, both comics and film, actually do what people would really do and it doesn't work, that's when it gets scary. Like the people in Cloverfield or the people in the War of the Worlds remake, and they try this or that, and it fails horribly, and you're like, gosh, what are they going to do now? That's what I would have done, and it didn't work, right? Rather than the typical Hollywood approach of walk into the dark room. Hello? Is anyone here? Never turn on the light. Hello? Bobby?
Well, the light's always on a string, and you got to go to the center of the room to turn
it's
on.
Like, come on, nobody does that. Do what they would really do, and then if they get killed, it's even scarier. But they
walk into a dark room and go,
climb to the top of the water tower.
Right.
There's a killer in the house. Run upstairs.
Why?
There's a killer. Run upstairs to the attic and hide.
Why do they go up?
Yeah,
I know.
When they're running.
Hit him once with a skillet to stun him and then run. Like, no, hit him 100 times with it.
Hit him 100 times with a skillet, right? Not just once. Oh gosh. Well, guys, we're coming to the end of the broadcast, and I want to thank y'all for joining us and sharing all your thoughts about giant monsters.
They have a big heart.
Yeah, you do. And so does Aaron.
Godzilla says,
regardless of the rumor, Godzilla says. And as we always do at this time, we like to close our broadcast with a classic, and that is Make Mine. Silverline. Good night, everybody.
Hi, my name is Sergio Cariello, and Make Mine Silverline.